The decanter of port was, in fact, almost empty, and Cecil said he had had only one glass, while Johnny had been sure that he had not drunk more than 2. The General must have had something like 4. The doctor had been just a little surprised. Not that the General should have drunk 4 glasses of port, but at their effect upon him. He had not considered his condition so dangerous, or he would have forbidden him alcohol altogether. But there the General was, patently dead of apoplexy, and all the doctor could do about it then was to sign the death certificate to that effect. Johnny had been very much upset. The General had drunk a lot of port, and Johnny was upset to think that he might perhaps have stopped him and never did. And the General had got excited too, talking about old times in his regiment when he was a giddy lieutenant, and the pranks they used to play in the mess on guest nights. But the fault was equally Cecil's. Cecil might have stopped him too, and never did. Actually, however, Cecil had not been in the room when the General died. He had gone out about 5 minutes earlier to get something for the General from the library. Johnny had come to him there and told him that the General had had a stroke and what ought to be done about it. When the two of them got back to the dining room, the General was dead. Johnny had been very much upset. Still sitting on the bed, Lena read through the pages again. Johnny must have been interested, as well as upset. The notes at the end seemed to be jottings of what the General had been doing to bring on his attack. Johnny must have hurriedly written them down to tell the doctor. But why those horrible ha-has? And what did "try it anyhow" mean? Lena knew about the 3-chair trick. It was a favourite trick of Johnny's, requiring a good deal of strength and fitness. You put your head on the seat of one chair, your heels on another, with a third underneath your back. Then, supporting yourself on your heels and your head, you took the middle chair away from under you, passed it over your body, and slipped it underneath again on the other side. Got it. The 3-chair trick. That could only mean one thing. Johnny had suddenly realized what had caused the General's stroke. He had been trying to do the 3-chair trick, and it had been too much for him. But it would have been madness to have done such a thing, a madness. He had been warned not to take any great exertion. The 3-chair trick was a tremendous exertion. Johnny used to say it was the biggest physical strain he knew. Of course, the General had had a good deal to drink, and having knocked it off to a great extent during the previous year or 2, it might have gone to his head. That could have made him forget the doctor's warning and try the 3-chair trick. But it was inconceivable that Johnny could have let him do it. Johnny knew all about his condition. Everyone knew. It had been common knowledge for a year or more that the General, though not in a state which could possibly be called dangerous, had yet to begin to take care. Johnny could not possibly have let the old man do such an insane thing. Lena thought she knew what must have happened. They had been talking about the 3-chair trick, and then Johnny had gone to help Cecil look for the General's spectacle case in the library, and during his absence the old man must have tried it. Probably Johnny had heard him fall before he reached the library and hurried back. But if he had told the doctor what he suspected, the other had never passed it on to the rest of the family. It was the first time Lena had heard of the 3-chair trick in connection with her father's death. She got up and slipped the little notebook into a drawer in Johnny's chest of drawers. At first, she thought she would ask him if her father had really done this preposterous thing, had practically killed himself like that. Then she decided that it would serve no purpose after all. Lena always preferred to remain ignorant of a possibly unpleasant fact than be forced to acknowledge it. Mechanically, for her thoughts still persisted in playing round the notebook, she began to do up the bundle for the jumble sale. Chapter 14. Not much hope of tennis this afternoon. Hell's bells. Johnny, standing at the window with his hands in his pockets and contemplating the drizzle outside, breathed on the glass and drew a cross on the result with the end of his nose. Lena looked up from the stockings she was darning. "Johnny, did Cecil ever find Father's spectacles in the library the night he died?" "Good heavens, monkey face, I don't know. Why?" "I just wondered." Lena went on with her darning. Johnny began to walk restlessly about the room. Her head bent over her work, Lena asked, "Why did he want his spectacles in any case?" "I don't know." "Oh, to read a newspaper cutting I wanted to show him, I believe. Why?" "Oh, nothing. I just wish it had been you who went to look for the spectacles, not Cecil. That's all." "Why on earth do you wish that, you extraordinary little monkey face?" "I don't know. I just do. Then it would have been Cecil who was with him when he had that stroke, not you." "But Cecil couldn't have done any more for him than I could." "No, I suppose not." "That's about the 4th time this week you've asked me something like that," Johnny said idly. Lena started ever so slightly. "Is it?" She uttered a nervous little laugh. "How silly of me. I seem to have been thinking about Father lately for some reason or other." "Well, it's all more than 3 years ago now." "Yes," Lena agreed with an odd feeling of relief. "Nearly 4. 4 years is a long time. Somehow, things that happened nearly 4 years ago are not nearly so important as things that happened last week. But she really must not give way again to this nervous prompting to ask Johnny details about her father's death. It was true that Lena had been thinking a lot about her father and her father's death during the last week. She had tried hard not to do so, but all the time it was there in her mind, refusing to be thrust into oblivion. That little black notebook was haunting her. On the very first afternoon, she had removed it from the drawer in Johnny's room to a drawer in her own dressing table. A dozen times since then she had pored over it, with a fascination of repulsion. But for those ha-has, she would have asked Johnny about it with directness. But they prevented her, those appalling little written-down chuckles. She could not bear to confront Johnny with them and listen to his glibly lying explanation, for of course Johnny would lie. Why was she so sure that Johnny would lie? Lena put the stocking back in the basket, took up another, and spread out her hand in the foot. It was the 100th time she had asked herself this question. For the 100th time, she refused to answer it honestly. Johnny would lie, because to lie in the face of embarrassment was Johnny's nature. She would not ask herself why Johnny might be embarrassed. Lena knew that the General's spectacles had not been in the library at all. She remembered that they had been found the next day in a drawer of the dining-room sideboard, of all unlikely places. She remembered that quite clearly. Yet she had asked Johnny if Cecil did find them in the library. It was absurd to have asked a thing like that. It was absurd to ask anything at all, to keep giving way to this morbid feeling that she must speak to Johnny about the details of her father's death and force him to speak to her about them, to keep hoping that he would lie, so that she could make herself believe his lies, and yet hoping that he would not lie, so that she could believe that he never had lied. It was most absurd of all to go on brooding like this, just because Johnny had written down a few interesting facts about her father's diseases. To go on brooding until the preposterous fancies, which she absolutely refused even to form in her conscious moments, came crowding on her, fully and grotesquely grown in her dreams. She dropped her hands and stared at Johnny. The epitome of boredom, he was picking out on one finger on the piano a popular foxtrot. Guilty. 2 nights later, the Aysgarths were dining at Winnie's. Lady Fortnum had a small house party for the weekend, and after dinner the men had been trying who could put a half-crown furthest on the floor with 1 foot off the ground. "Johnny," Lena said suddenly, "do your trick with 3 chairs." "That?" Johnny smiled at her. "Oh, I haven't done that for years." "Try it," Lena persisted. Johnny shook his head. "Getting too old for that sort of thing. Besides, muscles have got soft. Why, I haven't done that trick since before your father died." Lena was packing, blindly, haphazard, almost hysterically. She threw her clothes into a big suitcase, just enough things to last for a week or 2. Johnny had gone out, and she could relax at last. How she had got through the rest of last evening she hardly knew. Still less how she had got through that interminable night, with Johnny sleeping at her side, till it was all she could do to hold herself back from screaming and throwing herself out of the bed, out of the room, and out of the house, while all the time there beat on her brain, as if it was the drum in some never-ending jazz band, the same refrain: "No, not since 2 minutes before Father died. No, not since 2 minutes before Father died. No, not since 2 minutes before Father died." She had had to bite the sides of her hands to fight down her hysteria. As soon as Johnny was out of the house, she had telephoned her wire to Ronald and then run straight upstairs to pack. In the train, she regained some of her control. Up Cottery was left behind, definitely now and forever. Up Cottery and Johnny. Johnny, the JP. Johnny, the murderer of her own father. Of course, now that she was calmer, she could understand how Johnny's mind had worked. To have called Johnny a murderer to his face would have upset him very much indeed. Johnny, of course, had never looked on what he had done in that light, not even when it was in contemplation. He had used no poison, he had employed no blunt instrument. Such a thing as murder had never entered his thoughts. Besides, gentlemen don't murder, but they may, quite permissibly, help another gentleman out of life. Johnny's reasoning would have been perfectly simple. General McLaidlaw might die at any moment. It would suit me extremely well if he would die at this one. If General McLaidlaw did certain things at this minute, he actually would die. Well, if he does them, that's his own lookout. No one's going to force him. And so Johnny had filled up the old man's port glass and gone on filling it. Hidden his spectacles so that Cecil could be sent to find them, led him on to excite himself with the memory of youthful exploits, and then... How could anyone call that murder? Johnny would have demanded, in surprised as well as hurt tones. Lena called it murder. She did not shirk the word or the thought. Johnny had murdered her own father, as certainly and as carefully as if he had shot him through the heart across his own dining table. She could not cry yet. This shock was too great for tears. Johnny. And she, incredibly, she could have Johnny hanged. hanged by the neck until he was dead. Johnny. She had only to take that notebook out of her suitcase into which she had thrown it and go with it to Scotland Yard. They would not refuse to recognize what she had known in her heart all the time, but would not admit to her reason that these notes had been made before and not after her father's death, that they were not the jottings of an interested novice of science, but a murderer's deliberate plan for his crime. Not they. They would... Lena tugged the heavy case down from the rack, delved into it to find the notebook, pulled out the pages and tore them into little bits, and threw the scraps out of the window. Or was it, legally, not murder at all? Lena, thankful she had the carriage to herself, pulled off her hat and passed her hand over her hot, aching forehead. When you incite a person to do something which both of you know will probably kill him, is that legally murder or not? Oh, what did it matter? The legal aspect did not count. Morally, it was murder. Morally, Johnny had touched bottom at last. Lena would have liked to cry, but could not. For the really heart-rending thing was that Johnny could never recognize it as murder. Johnny, with his infantile, moral blindness, could never see those things as any ordinarily decent person sees them, as Lena herself saw them. Lena saw Johnny as a murderer. Johnny saw himself either as one driven by circumstances to a certain unconventionality of action, or else as a rather clever person. Probably he had managed to persuade himself, too, that he was doing his father-in-law quite a kind turn, relieving pain, euthanasia. Lena shuddered. Yet she could not hate Johnny. She was horrified, even appalled, but one cannot hate a moral defective. But one cannot equally go on living with him. She forced herself to think of Ronald. Her flight to him had been instinctive. Ronald, with his solidity and dependability. Lena wanted desperately now to depend on somebody else at last. It had been part of the irony of her marriage with Johnny that she, so unfitted to be the responsible partner, had had to support Johnny in character as well as in purse. Well, that was all over now. Love is very decidedly not everything. Lena did not know whether she still loved Johnny or not. She very much feared that she might go on loving him, whatever he had done. And 4 years is a long time. Loving him, but not living with him. She had found that she could live with a thief, a cheat, a forger, a reprobate even, but not with a murderer. A murderer. It was still almost impossible to believe that Johnny was a murderer. Murder is always a thing apart from one's own life. People murder and are murdered, yes, but not the people one knows. Certainly not the people one loves. Lena thought bitterly that, just as the last person to realize a husband's promiscuity is his own wife, so the last persons to believe in a man's murderous possibilities are those who are closest to him. "What, George?" they cry, horror-stricken. "Impossible. He was always so kind to the cat." But Johnny was a murderer. There was no getting away from it, though in this case the last person to believe it would certainly be Johnny himself. She was still thinking about Johnny. Lena changed to the other side of the carriage, though sitting with her back to the engine always made her feel rather sick. She wished it would make her feel sick now, to give her something else to think about, though ever since last night there had been a horrid, empty feeling in the pit of her stomach, as if she were eternally descending a headlong lift which was worse than any genuine nausea. Ronald. Lena's mind reached forward from the quicksand of its emotions to its rock-like solidity. She had not treated Ronald very well. She had disappointed him too severely and too often. She had been a feckless little idiot, unable to make up her mind, unable to decide what she really wanted, drawing back each time she approached the brink of a decision. No wonder his letters had become fewer and less impassioned. It was, in fact, nearly a fortnight now since she had heard from him at all. No, she had not treated Ronald well, but she was going to make up for that now. The tears came into her eyes at last as she thought of Ronald's delight when she told him that she had made up her mind at last, that she had come to him for good without any reservations at all. It was wonderful to be wanted like that. Johnny had wanted her like that. But no, that was finished. There could be no possible weakening this time. Besides, within a few hours, she would have made any return to Johnny impossible. Once he had got her, Ronald would never let her go again. Lena knew that. And she knew that this time she would not want to go. No, she was not in love with Ronald. She could never be in love with anyone again, but she did love him, and she was going to try, thankfully and with all her power, to be a good wife to him. She wondered, would he kiss her on the platform? Ronald met her at Waterloo, but he did not kiss her on the platform. Lena's heart jumped as she saw him waiting for her. Yes, she loved him a lot, more than she had thought. She clung to him, with both hands clutching his coat sleeves, in gratitude and relief. She felt safe at last. Ronald would look after her now. "I've come to you, Ronald." "Yes." Ronald was looking down at her. She noticed with surprise that he seemed very much embarrassed. She thought it was because she was clinging to him in public, but she did not care. Ronald was there to be clung to. He cleared his throat. "I've got something to tell you, Lena." She smiled up at him affectionately. "Yes, darling?" It was good to be with Ronald, so safe and dependable. "I'd better tell you at once. Well, you kept me on a string too long." What?" "You kept me hanging too long. I decided you didn't care for me, really. I made up my mind you were in love with your husband all the time. I couldn't go on standing by indefinitely. So, well, I'm engaged to somebody else." "You don't love me any more?" "No," said Ronald, miserably. They looked at one another. Lena became conscious that people were beginning to stare. "My suitcase," she muttered. Ronald got her suitcase out of the carriage. He asked her if she wanted a taxi. "No," said Lena. "Will you get me a porter?" Ronald hailed a porter. Lena held out her hand. "Goodbye, Ronald." He took her hand awkwardly. "If there's anything I can do." "No," Lena said. "Goodbye." Ronald hesitated a moment, then lifted his hat and shambled away. Lena knew that he was feeling the worst possible cad, and she was sorry for him when it was not his fault at all. "Taxi, miss?" said the porter. Lena looked at him stupidly. Put it in the cloakroom, miss?" "Oh, no, thank you." She looked mechanically at the watch on her wrist. 3 minutes later, she crept into a train that would take her back to Up Cottery. There seemed nothing else to do. Chapter 15. Beaky Thwaite appeared to have no relations, few friends, and nothing at all to do. When Lena asked him, as she often did, how he spent his time, he did not seem very sure even of that.
"Oh, I don't know. Wander about, you know. Look up some old bean occasionally, and all that sort of thing."
"Don't you ever go to your house in Yorkshire?" Beaky was the not very willing owner of a large mansion and estate, including several thousand acres of grouse moor in Yorkshire.
"Oh, yes. I take some old bean up there now and then, you know. Don't stop there alone, though, if I can help it. Bores me stiff."
"What you want is a sensible wife to look after you. Why don't you get married, Beaky?" Beaky would laugh hugely.
"What? Married? No, thanks, not me. What? Besides, there aren't any sensible wives, what? Oh, sorry, Lena. Put my foot in it again. You're sensible, all right. Damn sensible. I don't know what the old bean would have done without you. Toddle off to the bow-wows, I expect. What?"
"Why do you say that?"
I don't know,"
Beaky would answer vaguely.
"Old Johnny always was a bit of a lad. What?"
But Lena knew that even Beaky had no idea how much of a lad old Johnny had been. Beaky stayed at Delfield a lot now. Johnny, rather surprisingly, encouraged him to do so, and Beaky needed very little encouragement. It was obvious to Lena that Beaky was enormously fond of Johnny. The worship which had been accorded him when they were schoolboys was still hardly diminished. In his admiration of Johnny, Beaky was never tired of relating to Lena episodes and escapades in which Johnny had played the principal part to the enthusiastic audience of Beaky. Beaky admitted that his own schooldays would have been distressingly dull but for the way Johnny had dared him into sharing his adventures. Lena was interested in these stories for the light that they threw on Johnny the fledgling. The actual friendship between the two was illuminating. It was plain from Beaky's remarks that Johnny had been one of the most popular boys in the school, even before he reached the glories of the first 11 and the first 15. He might have chosen anyone as his particular friend, and he had chosen Beaky, the unathletic, though persevering, and the not too popular. Lena thought she knew why Johnny had done this. For one thing, the abundant admiration which Beaky offered him, and the ability to twist his Jonathan round his little finger, had appealed more to Johnny than a more equal friendship with someone of his own standing in the school. That was usual enough, when the more spectacular character of the two lacked ballast. But Lena thought there had been a little more in it than that. Beaky had probably applauded escapades which a less infatuated friend would have denounced. Even now, for instance, he seemed to think it only a joke that Johnny should have been asked to leave 2 terms before he should have done so, owing to certain petty thefts of money from trouser pockets in the changing-room having been traced to him. Lena did not like Beaky, but it was impossible to dislike him. He was the most vacuous person she had ever known. The land scheme in Bournemouth still seemed to be hanging fire. Johnny reported fresh difficulties from time to time. Always, just when things appeared to be going smoothly at last, some new trouble would crop up. However, Johnny's spirits did not suffer. He remained just as cheerful, whatever happened. Beaky left everything to him. He took no part in the negotiations whatever, confining his activities to sitting beside Johnny occasionally in the car when they went out to look for new sites. The prospect of making a few more thousands did not excite him at all. He had more already than he could spend. Lena thought his only interest in the affair was the excuse it offered of seeing Johnny and staying a great deal at Delfield. She wished that something could be settled, so that Beaky should not have to stay quite so much at Delfield. From time to time she hinted as much to Johnny. But Johnny, unexpectedly, seemed to want Beaky to stay at Delfield as much as possible. Lena was sure that Beaky bored Johnny almost as much as he bored her, and she could not understand why he should want him about the place. Johnny, however, could not help her there. He did not seem to know himself, or if he did, could not explain. "Oh, I don't know," he would say carelessly. "I like old Beaky, you know." "Yes, but he's so boring. Sometimes I feel I simply can't bear him a minute longer." "We must put up with him for a bit till this thing's over. He's going to be damned useful to us after all. Be a good little monkey face and help me out." And Lena would remember the early resolutions of her married life and make up her mind to bear Beaky a little longer in order to help Johnny. But when Johnny was tackled upon the question of how much longer he would need helping in this way, he was still more vague. Things weren't going well. But things might suddenly go better. One never knew. One just had to see. Lena, deploring her inferiority in matters of business, was unable to find the searching questions which she felt must be waiting somewhere, if one only knew from experience where to look for them. 4 years is a long time. Even 3 months is enough to turn the most mind-haunting horror into something that neither haunts nor horrifies. Lena could hardly believe, when Joyce and Cecil brought Robert and Armorel to stay at Delfield for Christmas, that 4 years ago on that day, Johnny had brought about her father's death. With a little notebook scattered from the train, she had even managed to persuade herself that she might have imagined the whole thing. In any case, she no longer thought of it as murder. And whether it, rather improbably now, were true or not, it had all happened 4 years ago. It was absurd, Lena was now convinced, to upset one's life for something that had happened 4 years ago. She had gone back to Delfield with the knowledge that Johnny, who had cheated and stolen and forged, had now been proved to have murdered too. He had touched bottom. Things could never be worse. She had found a kind of grim consolation in that reflection. Whatever Johnny did in the future could never be worse than he had done already. And in spite of what Johnny had done, Lena loved him more than ever. That was why she had never even considered seeking refuge with Joyce. At times she thought with some perturbation that what Johnny had done had, in a way, actually increased her love for him, at any rate on its protective side. Certainly it had not diminished it. Lena wondered whether she too might be learning to turn a short-sighted eye on moral realities. She enjoyed her Christmas. Beaky she had firmly refused to invite, in spite of Johnny's urging, and she was able to have several long and satisfactory conversations with Joyce. It gave her a good deal of pleasure to be able to tell Joyce with complete truth that she really was happy, and to see that Joyce believed her. She was rather superior towards Joyce, adopting the idea that Joyce had very nearly managed to persuade her into making a mess of her life, and that only by her own finer perceptions had she saved herself at the last minute. Joyce quite acknowledged now that Lena had not been such a weak fool as she had thought in going back to Johnny. It gave Lena still more pleasure to hear Joyce admit, as Joyce, with her usual honesty, did admit, that Johnny undoubtedly did love his wife. Johnny was very sweet to Lena all the time they were at Delfield, and his attitude was not lost upon Joyce. She asked Lena penetrating questions about Johnny's behaviour during the last 8 months, and could find no loopholes in it. "Well, perhaps it all happened for the best after all," she delivered judgment. "I don't pretend to admire your Johnny, and I'd much rather have seen you go off with Ronald, but you weren't such a fool as I thought. Johnny certainly does love you. He's had his shock, and it's improved him. And so long as he makes you happy, I don't care. But if he ever slides again, my girl—" "He won't," said Lena. She had no doubts about that now. And of course, Joyce knew nothing of any other possible directions in which Johnny might slide, though of those two, Lena had few doubts now. But she did catch herself once or twice looking at Joyce across the table at Christmas dinner. Or rather, Joyce caught her. "Why so solemn, Lena? What are you thinking about?" "Oh, nothing," Lena answered, and smiled quickly. Actually, she had been thinking, "What would you say, Joyce, if you knew that my husband had killed our father?" But the fact that Johnny had only distressed her now when she remembered it. It distressed her almost as much to realize how seldom she did remember it. And as things turned out, the only lasting difference that her discovery of the notebook made to Lena was the loss of £300 a year. In a fit of panic at the remembrance of what Johnny had once done when he was short of money, she had raised his allowance again to £500 a year. So Johnny scored. After Christmas, promptly arrived Beaky for a week's visit. Johnny had invited him without saying anything to Lena about it. Lena was annoyed and told Johnny so. "It won't be for much longer," Johnny soothed her. Lena, who had meditated a week's banting following the usual Christmas overeating, had to content herself with buying a most expensive belt instead. She had to be really careful about her figure now. It was during the first day or two of this visit of Beaky's that a faint suspicion crept into Lena's mind. She began to fear that Johnny's real reason for keeping Beaky in such close touch with him was that, having a rich man at his disposal, he was determined not to let him go, so that if the land scheme did fall through, he could find some other way of separating Beaky from some of his unneeded thousands. And as soon as the suspicion was really lodged in her mind, she began to fear, too, that Johnny was actually meditating some such plan already. Knowing Johnny, Lena took it for granted that the plan, if plan there was, would be an unscrupulous one. She did not know quite what to do about it. Of course, it was quite useless to ask Johnny outright, but she did ask him one night in the bedroom if he was short of money. "Short?" said Johnny. "How do you mean?" "Well, have you run up any more debts or anything like that?" "Are you offering to pay them for me if I have?" Johnny grinned. "No, I'm not. I just wondered. Have you?" "Not a one," Johnny said blithely. "Your husband's a reformed character, Mrs. Aysgarth, thanks to you." "Darling," said Lena, almost mechanically fond. But she was not altogether satisfied. There was a glib air sometimes about Johnny, which she mistrusted. She debated whether she ought to warn Beaky. It is not a pleasant or an easy thing to warn a guest that one's husband is not quite to be trusted in matters of finance. But Lena, nagged at by her conscience, did her best. One morning, when Johnny was busy with his cows, she tackled Beaky about it. "Beaky, how are things getting on with you and Johnny?" Beaky looked up from the book he was reading by the drawing-room fire.
"Eh? Oh, I don't know. Leave all that to the old bean, you know."
"Yes, that's what I mean. Why are you so slack, Beaky? You shouldn't leave everything to Johnny like this. You ought to keep an eye on things yourself, too." Beaky laughed his enormous laugh.
"Hello? What's this? Pie jaw, what? Reminds me of being hauled up in front of the old chief. You're getting slack-thwaite, what? What? Eh? Damn good."
"No, I'm serious, Beaky."
"Are you? What? Top hole. I say, have you read this muck? What? Got it off your shelves? Can't make head or tail of it. Friend of yours, I expect. You know all these comic birds, don't you? Good God! What?"
"Beaky," Lena said patiently, "do you mind just listening to me for a moment?"
"Rather. Like to have these things explained to me. Bit weak in the top story, I expect, what? Don't be too highbrow, though. Well, what's it all about, what? Sorry I called it muck. Friend of yours and all that sort of rot, I expect, what? Eh? Well?"
"I'm not talking about that book."
"Oh, aren't you? Sorry. Thought you were. Yeah, I say, not carrying on with the pie jaw still, are you? What?"
"You can call it a pie jaw if you like. Beaky, I want to know, how much money are you putting into this scheme?"
"Oh, I don't know. The old bean said we'd want about 15,000. Probably lose it all, but who cares? Yeah, I say, you at a loose end this morning, Lena? What about a walk or something? I feel a bit lousy myself too, eh? What about it?"
"No, thank you," Lena said with forbearance. "I don't want to go for a walk. I want to talk to you."
"Carry on, Sergeant," said Mr. Thwaite amiably.
"Beaky, I don't think you're being fair to Johnny," Lena began, and paused to admire the inspiration of this opening. By pretending to put the blame on Beaky himself, she would be able to convey her hint much more delicately. "I don't think you're being fair to him," she repeated. "You must remember that—"
"Here, take a pew, what?" interrupted Mr. Thwaite. "I know some old beans yap better on their pins, but it puts the wind up me. What? I mean, standing over me like a beak. What? Sorry. You know what I mean. Take a pew, what?"
Lena sat down and began again. It was unfair to Johnny because Johnny, compared with Beaky, was a poor man.
"Oh, rot!" protested Mr. Thwaite. "Here, I say, draw it mild. What?"
"A poor man," repeated Lena firmly. "And it was not fair to put on a poor man the responsibility of a very large sum of money belonging to somebody else. Supposing things went wrong, supposing Johnny made an error of judgment, he was not a businessman. He might quite possibly lose a large proportion of the money. And how would he feel then? Very perturbed indeed, very upset, especially since, if the error was a particularly gross one, he would not be able to repay what he had lost. It was not fair. Beaky ought to take an equal responsibility. He must look into things for himself and decide for himself whether Johnny's advice was always sound or not. Now, did Beaky understand?
I get you, Beaky nodded sagely. I get you, old bean. Sorry, Lena, I mean, what? You mean the old bean's a proper old mutt, what? You're afraid he'll be twisted right and left. I don't mean anything of the sort, Lena snapped, wishing Beaky were not quite so obtuse. She tried to explain herself further, but still without giving Johnny away. An hour later, when she was powdering her nose before lunch, she heard Beaky and Johnny in conversation just under her window. Beaky's loud tones carried themselves without difficulty to her dressing table. "Hello, old bean. Been looking for you. Yeah, I say, what's the matter with Lena, what, eh?" Something inaudible from Johnny. "Why, she's been trying to persuade me for the last hour that you're soft in the head, what? Good God! I mean, all the land sharks in Bournemouth are going to see you coming a mile away. She says I'd much better pull out while the cash is still there before you've been twisted out of it, eh? Damn good, what? Good God! Thank the Lord I'm not married, what? Sorry. Putting my foot in it again, what? Didn't mean that. Lena's one of the best and all that sort of rot, but she seems to think you've got a screw loose, old bean. Suppose all wives think that about their husbands, though, what? Otherwise they wouldn't have married 'em, eh? Good God!" Johnny was very angry. "What business is it of yours?" he demanded. "That's what I want to know. What business is it of yours?" Lena was never slow to flare up when someone else was already alight. "You ought to know what business it is of mine." "What do you mean?" "Well, would you rather I asked Captain Melbeck to say a word to Beaky?" Lena was sorry for the sentence as soon as she had uttered it. It seemed, however, to roll off Johnny's back. "Good Lord! If you're going to be for ever bringing up that old stuff," he said with angry disgust. Already Lena was penitent for bringing up that old stuff. "But, Johnny, you remember what you used to be like?" "Oh, yes, I know all that. But have I been like it lately? That was years ago. You know I'm quite different now. And here you are practically warning Beaky that I'm not fit to be trusted with twopence halfpenny of anyone else's." "Johnny, I didn't put it like that. You know what an idiot Beaky is. He got it all wrong. All I said was that it isn't fair of him to leave everything to you. He ought to take responsibility for the decisions too. That's all I said." "Are you sure?" "Of course I am. You know what an idiot Beaky is." Johnny grinned. "All right. Sorry I blew you up, monkey face. I thought you'd got it into your head that I was trying to twist him or some damn nonsense." "Kiss me." "Darling," said Lena. "Now come along. We must go down to lunch." Not for quite a couple of hours did she realize that this was precisely what she had imagined, and still did. Chapter 16. The Aysgarth's position in the county was a curious one, typical of the transition period in which they lived. Connected as Johnny was with most of the old families living in Dorsetshire, the Aysgarths were on intimate terms, so far as it is possible for terms among old families to be intimate, with houses into which Lady Fortnum was not received at all. On the other hand, the Lady Fortnums of the county, and there were plenty of them, looked down on Johnny as definitely below their social level because he had worked for his living. He and Lena were invited to Whinny's on little more than sufferance, and yet it was on little more than sufferance that they went. The Aysgarths, in fact, at Delfield, were neither quite of the old order nor of the new.
The more the land of England is changing hands, the more do the former holders by right of birth look down on the new owners by right of purchase, and the more do the latter scoff at the former. For one who takes pleasure in despising his neighbour more than himself, the English countryside of this decade offers exceptional opportunities. When, therefore, Lady Fortnum found herself short of a man for the party she was taking over to a regimental ball at Poole, she had no compunction in ringing up Beaky, whom she had met twice, and inviting him to dine and go on with the party, without thinking it necessary to include Beaky's host and hostess in her invitation. "Here, I say," observed Mr. Thwaite, coming back from the telephone in much perturbation. "Here, this is a bit thick, you know. What? I mean, look here, old bean, what the devil am I to say? What?" He explained the dilemma. "A sweet piece of impertinence," Johnny grinned. "And what did you say, Beaky?" "Well, dash it all, old bean. I mean, I hedged. What? Told her I'd have to find out if you had an engagement. I mean, well, dash it all. What? Look here. I say she's hanging on. What shall I say?" "Go if you want to, Beaky," said Lena. "Don't if you don't. Do you?" "Oh, draw it mild. I mean, good God. Well, after all, I suppose a dance is a dance, isn't it? But look here, I say, if she's got the nerve not to ask you too, well, I mean, dash it all." "You go, Beaky," Lena advised. So Beaky went. "I think that about reaches even her limit for downright impudence," observed Lena, but without rancour. The absence of rancour was due to the fact that at any rate she would have an evening without Beaky, which was a relief. During the course of it she said, tentatively, to Johnny, "Johnny, I don't want to be a nuisance or interfere with your plans, but need we really have Beaky to stay again for a long, long time?" Johnny grinned at her. "Getting a bit fed up?" "Yes, he's so dull." "I'm getting fed up too. We won't have him again." "What, never?" "I hope not." "You can manage the business without him?" "Oh, Lord, yes." Johnny paused. "As a matter of fact," he said airily, "it's all a washout." "What, the land scheme?" "Yes. The price of land has gone up. We couldn't make a good enough profit. Don't tell Beaky that, though," Johnny added quickly. "Why not?" "I'll tell him myself, by letter, when I call the whole thing off." "Why not tell him before he goes?" "Oh, I don't know. He'd want to ask a lot of fool questions. It'd be easier by letter." Lena felt her heart give a little leap. Johnny had spoken far, far too glibly. She thought, "There's something wrong here, my lad." Quite casually she asked, "What's going to happen to the money, then?" "The money?" Johnny looked his artless surprise. "The 15,000 that you brought back from America." "Oh. Well, I suppose Beaky will use it in some other way. I don't know." "Has he got it now, or have you?" "He has. You're very curious this evening, Monkey Face." Lena forced a laugh. "Am I? I didn't mean to be. I suppose I want to talk to you, now we've got an evening to ourselves for once." "Well, don't let's talk about that business. I'm sick of it. And of course it's been a great disappointment to me." But Johnny did not look disappointed in the least, though he obviously tried. Lena hid her alarm as she thought to herself, "Johnny has made up his mind to get that 15,000 somehow. I'm certain he has." She felt suddenly very miserable and dispirited. Johnny had relapsed. But she had no evidence that Johnny had relapsed. On the contrary, Johnny had spoken the truth. Not for a moment had Lena believed that the £15,000 was in the possession of Beaky. Wrapping up her question as much as possible, though careless of what Johnny might say did he discover that it had ever been put, she found out from Beaky the next morning that the £15,000 really was in his own keeping. It was lodged in a bank in Paris, under an alias. "Why do you have to be so secretive about it?" asked Lena, worried.
Good God, I don't know. Ask the old bean. Agin the law, or some rot.
"Johnny would know, of course," Lena said quickly, doing her best to prevent this conversation from being repeated too. "Did he advise secrecy?"
Rather. Half the fun, what? Don't want to be copped and jugged, eh? I mean, what?
"No, of course you don't," Lena said brightly. But the conversation had not eased her mind. If anything, it worried her still more that Beaky should have the money himself. For how, in that case, did Johnny contemplate getting it, except by some scheme that would be quite flagrant? There were 2 whole days left of Beaky's visit. Lena did not know what to do. She did not see how she could warn Beaky more than she had done already. If he had been too stupid to take her hints, then she had done all she could for him. Besides, it was not the possibility of Beaky losing his money that worried her in the least. That prospect meant nothing to her at all. What terrified her was the unmasking of Johnny as the dishonest agent of Beaky's loss. She did not know what to do. The thought occurred to her of asking Johnny outright why this suspicious secrecy was necessary, of questioning and pestering him until she got at some clue to the plan that Johnny must have in his mind. But Johnny, she felt sure, would not allow himself to be questioned and pestered, and in her ignorance he could so easily put her off with a plausible answer. In any case, she did remember vaguely something about a prohibition against the removal of funds from England during the crisis, though whether it was still in force or not, she did not know. But such a prohibition there seemed to have been, and Beaky seemed to have contravened it, so the employment of secrecy would, according to Johnny, be quite plausible. Sitting in front of her dressing-table mirror, as she curled the back ends of her hair before dinner, Lena laid down the tongs and stared sightlessly at her own reflection. Why had Johnny called the land scheme off so suddenly, and why had he been so anxious that Beaky should not know yet? And why, for that matter, had he told her? Had it been by way of preparation for some surprise later? Why? Oh, God! Lena breathed wretchedly. It was all beginning again, and she had thought it all finished. The old load of unfair responsibility, enormous responsibility which she hated so much, and with which she felt herself so unfitted to cope, was pressing down on her again. She took up her tongs from their little nest of fire in the meter holder and went on with their work. Whether one's husband is meditating larceny on a grand scale, or whether he is not, one's back hair must still be curled. She worked mechanically, her mind busy. The tongs slipped, and burnt the side of her neck. She uttered a little squeak and searched hurriedly for cold cream. As if the physical stimulus had jogged her mind, her thoughts became less despondent. After all, what evidence had she? None at all. There was nothing whatever, really, to show that Johnny was meditating any such crime. It had just been her intuition, and Lena had read enough books by men to know how fallible feminine intuition is. She had probably been imagining the whole thing. Yes, that was it. Her imagination, stimulated by fear and the knowledge of Johnny's old weakness, had carried her away. Johnny had assured her only a couple of days ago that all that kind of thing was dead and buried. She must have more faith in him. Johnny had not relapsed at all. She had imagined the whole thing. While she finished dressing, Lena was very busy persuading herself that she had imagined the whole thing. But in the drawing room, after dinner, her fears returned. Johnny was so very attentive to Beaky. Uselessly, Lena told herself that it was absurd of her to be suspicious because Johnny was attentive to Beaky. She remembered only too well how attentive Johnny had been to herself when he was about to rob her. And here was Johnny behaving in exactly the same way to Beaky, laughing at his silly jokes, encouraging him to the reminiscence that Beaky loved, pressing drinks and cigars on him, quite ignoring his wife in his concentration on his guest. "Ho, ho!" roared Beaky, already rather drunk. "Here, draw it mild, old bean. You'll have me tanked soon. What? I mean, won't Lena have a spot?" "No, thank you," said Lena coldly. She really disliked Beaky now, for being about to be robbed by Johnny. Too restless to sit down, she moved to the piano, which she had not opened for months. Johnny meant to rob Beaky. How was she going to stop it? "Going to strum?" inquired Beaky superfluously. "Top hole! Here, I say, old bean, remember those songs old Hardy had on that gramophone of his? Pretty ghastly, what? Carolina Brown, eh? Good God! Play Carolina Brown, Lena." Lena played Debussy. She thought, "My husband's going to rob you, you idiot. My husband's going to rob you of £15,000. Why the hell can't you stop him for yourself?" She got up from the piano. Beaky, egged on by Johnny, was consuming yet another whisky and soda. He would probably be drunk soon. Was Johnny trying to make him drunk? Why? Johnny would certainly have no difficulty in making Beaky drunk if he wanted. Beaky did anything Johnny suggested. And if he demurred, it only needed an adult version, and not so very adult either, of the old schoolboy dare to bring Beaky up to scratch at once. But why should Johnny be trying, apparently, to make Beaky drunk here and now? The money, in any case, was in Paris. "I think I shall go to bed," Lena said. Johnny nodded. Beaky rose, not too steadily. Lena looked at him with distaste. She thought again, "Yes, my husband's going to rob you. He's going to rob you of that £15,000 as sure as eggs are eggs. He's going to get that money if he has to kill you for it, if—" "Darling, what's the matter?" exclaimed Johnny. "Hello? Here, I say. Good God!" said Beaky. Lena had fainted. Johnny meant to kill Beaky. Lena knew it. She could not prove it. She could not argue it. She could not defend her conviction in any way. She simply knew it. And what was she going to do about it? All night long, after Johnny had carried her up to her bedroom, she lay awake, trying to force her distracted mind to deal with this dreadful emergency. And in the morning, she still had no plan. Beaky was going the next day but one, and some time after that, unless she prevented it, Johnny would kill him. She had 2 whole days in which to find a means of preventing it. What was she going to do? Stray remarks of Johnny's had taken on a new significance now. It was the last time Beaky would stay at Delfield. The failure of the land scheme was a great disappointment, when Johnny had not looked disappointed at all, when Johnny had tried to look disappointed and failed. Lena saw now why Johnny had abandoned the land scheme. It was horribly true that there was not enough profit in it. There would be far more profit in getting rid of Beaky altogether. There would be £15,000 profit in that. And the reason for all that secrecy about the money was now only too plain. It would never be traced to Johnny, because nobody at all, except their 3 selves, knew of its existence. But Johnny had insisted on secrecy from the very first. Did that mean that from the very first he had meditated? Lena buried her burning face in her hot pillow. It was too horrible, and only she could stop it. And what was she going to do? In the end, she did nothing. As the morning drew on, she saw more and more clearly that she had been making a colossal, a perfectly hideous mistake. A single stab of preposterous inspiration had led to a whole night's nightmare, and that was all. It is ridiculous to take seriously the bogies that sit on one's bed when one's head is splitting and one cannot sleep. Indigestion. From indigestion of the stomach to indigestion of the mind is only a short step after all. The whole thing had been indigestion, and nothing more. Ordering the meals, doing the flowers, washing out a pair of stockings, among normal tasks and normal sights, Lena rapidly became normal herself. It was, she saw, and even smiled at herself for ever having failed to see it, quite impossible for murder to connect itself with such a very ordinary household as Delfield. Murder. Johnny contemplating the murder of Beaky. Husband Johnny contemplating the murder of friend Beaky. What could be more impossible? Of course, there had been that incident 4 years ago. But that had not been murder, not exactly murder. And it might very well not have been anything at all. Lena had never known, and nowadays she did not want to know. But more and more she had been taking it for granted lately that her imagination had created the whole thing. Nothing like that scene which she had visualized had ever taken place at all. She practically believed that now. She did believe it. So, of course, there simply was no precedent. And without a precedent, this new piece of idiocy would naturally never have entered her mind at all. So, there one was. But just to prove to herself how mistaken she had been, how wickedly mistaken, she noticed Johnny very carefully during that evening. And Johnny was perfectly normal. Johnny was normal, Lena was normal, Beaky was as near normal as he ever could be. Everything was normal, and too much imagination is a great curse. Fortunately, Lena was far too worn out that night to exercise the curse. She slept for 9 hours without opening an eye. But in the morning, her doubts returned. She felt heavy and depressed, as one does when one has slept too long. The breakfast tray seemed to weigh her down in bed. She did not even open the Times. Sipping her coffee, she tried to tackle the problem. This was no fit of silly panic. She ought to be able to see things in their right perspective now. Lena was quite sure, she kept telling herself how sure she was, that everything was quite all right. But the problem was, ought one not, with Johnny, to be prepared for the worst? Lena felt dispiritedly that one ought. Everything was quite all right, of course, but one ought to insure against the worst, by speaking the right word now. But to whom should one speak it? Beaky or Johnny? How on earth could she say to Beaky, "Just be careful of Johnny, keep your eye on him. It's quite on the cards that he's made up his mind to kill you"? Impossible. And even less could one say to Johnny, "I know you were responsible for Father's death. I've a suspicion that you may be planning something of the same kind against Beaky. You'd better not, that's all." No. That would mean the end of everything between herself and Johnny. If he once knew what she thought he had done, whether he had really done it or not, their marriage could not continue. On the other hand, "Oh, God," said Lena wretchedly. She wished she had a stronger mind. She wished she was one of those people who always know exactly what to do, whatever the emergency. In her bath, she tried to persuade herself that there was no emergency at all. She tried to recapture her happy conviction of yesterday, but it would not come. There was probably no emergency, but there might be. That was as near as she could get to it. And all the time she was busy stifling the horrid, heart-pumping dread, growing nearer to certainty every minute, that there was an emergency, a terrible emergency, and that she herself was too cowardly to face it. All the morning the feeling grew on her. What was she going to do? The normal tasks which yesterday had restored her sanity today seemed grimly ironical in comparison with the horror that was fermenting. She was alone in the house except for the servants. Johnny and Beaky had gone off in the car to look at some land that was for sale on some cliffs somewhere by the sea. They were to be back for lunch. Suddenly the thought pierced her. Why had Johnny taken Beaky to look at more land when he had already decided that the land scheme was a failure? Why had he taken Beaky to some cliffs? Lena started up from the chair on which she had been sitting. Her sewing was strewed, unregarded, on the floor. She pressed her hand to her aching forehead. She knew now. The time had come. Johnny was going to push Beaky over the cliff. The time had come, and here was she in Upcottery, unable to prevent it. She did not even know where they had gone. But she must do something, anything. She could not sit here while somewhere else Johnny was committing murder. What was she to do? What was she to do? In a panic of indecision, a dozen hopeless plans flashed across her mind. She would ring up the police. She would borrow someone's car and drive like mad to the likeliest place. She would get the BBC to broadcast an SOS. She made little darting runs towards the telephone, towards the front door, towards the kitchen. This would not do. This was utter idiocy. If Beaky was to be saved, she must keep calm. She must keep calm. She must think calmly and coolly what was best to do. She could not keep calm. Across her distracted vision the whole scene passed, in a series of horrid little vignettes. The car running smoothly over the turf as it drew off the road, Beaky, appreciative and loudly old-beaning, Johnny inviting him to look over the edge of the cliff at the rocks below. That sudden thrust in the small of Beaky's back, Beaky dropping, 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 turning leisurely over in the air, until... Lena screwed her knuckles into her eyes. What was she to do? It was 12:30. She could do nothing. In an apathy of despair, she sat down again. Well, she would know soon enough now. They were to be back for lunch. If, within the next half hour, they had not returned... They did not return within the next half hour. At 1:30, Lena, pale and trembling, but with a composed face, lunched alone, for the benefit of the servants. She had thought it all out. At the inquest it would be fatal, quite fatal, if there appeared any hint that she had been anticipating what happened. That would at once throw doubt on it being an accident at all. Lena quite understood that. She was calm now, and she knew that Johnny's life depended on her keeping her head. As she drank her soup, she thought, Beaky's dead now. It was strange that she could think that with so little emotion. At 2:10, Johnny and Beaky drove up to the front door. Lena ran out to meet them and fell into Johnny's arms, sobbing, "Oh, Johnny!" "Sorry we're so late, darling. Hello, what's up?" "I've been imagining the most dreadful things." Lena wept with truth. Actually, the truth was just as far as it could have been from Lena's imaginings. So far from Johnny ever having contemplated killing Beaky, he had saved Beaky's life, and at the greatest danger to his own. "The old bean won't tell you a word about it himself, I'll bet," Beaky bubbled. "So you can have it straight from the horse's mouth. What? Damned close shave. We both of us nearly conked, I can tell you. Good God! Bit of a hero, old bean, aren't you? What?" "Oh, shut up, you ass," Johnny grinned. What had happened was that they had run the Bentley onto the turf bordering the cliffs, exactly as Lena had imagined, while they looked round. When they were ready to leave, Beaky, who was driving, had turned the car round while Johnny stood by the edge, idly watching the waves among the rocks at the bottom. He had glanced up to see Beaky still backing and Beaky's back wheels within a foot of the edge. With completely characteristic asininity, Beaky was manoeuvring on the very limited piece of turf without even looking towards his rear. Johnny had to act in a flash. There was no time to warn Beaky. Before his shout could penetrate Beaky's understanding, the car would be over the cliff. He leapt forward, bounded onto the running board and clutched the handbrake. The engine stalled, there was a lurch and a thud, and the car had come to rest with its back wheels spinning free in the air. It was half over the cliff, but it stopped there. Johnny and Beaky climbed very gingerly out to find labourers and a horse to drag the car into safety. The chances had been about even whether Johnny, clinging desperately to the handbrake, might not have gone over the cliff with the car. "I tell you, the old bean's a pucker hero," spluttered Beaky. Lena looked at Johnny, her eyes wet. How could she have thought such things about him? It would have served her right if Johnny had been killed, in trying to do the very opposite from what she had so wickedly thought. "Oh, Johnny," she muttered. That evening the rescue of Beaky was celebrated. Never had Johnny been merrier, or Beaky more boisterous. Lena felt as if years had been taken off her age. "Well, cheero," said Beaky, extending a large hand. "Thanks frightfully, and all that sort of rot. What?" Johnny was peering into the radiator of Beaky's Bentley. "Hello, you're a bit short of water. I'll get a can while you're making your farewells to Lena."
"Will you really? I say, thanks frightfully."
"And you're going straight up to Yorkshire?" Lena said conversationally.
"That's the idea."
"But you'll never do it in a day from here."
"What? I say, draw it mild. Only about 300 to my place. Bit boring there, alone. May stay a night in some pub. See what happens, what? Here, I say, don't stand out here. Too parky, what?"
"I'm quite all right," Lena smiled. "And when are we going to see you again, Beaky?"
"What, me? God knows. I mean, I'll tootle along sometime, I expect. Depends when you ask me, doesn't it? What, eh?"
Beaky evidently considered this a joke, and paid tribute to it heartily. Something said clearly in Lena's mind, "You'll never see Beaky again, never, unless—" The blood drained from her face. She stared at him. A terrible thought had come to her. Johnny had saved Beaky's life because he had not been ready for him to die. The money was in a Paris bank under an alias. Only Beaky could draw a cheque for it. Until Johnny had Beaky's cheque, Beaky must not die. Lena knew that this revelation meant that she could delude herself no longer. She had 2 minutes in which to act, and if she did not act, Beaky's life might be the price of her complacence. It was her last chance, and his. Johnny did mean to kill Beaky sometime. Lena knew it. She always had known it, really. Once Beaky drove away from here. "Beaky!" she gasped out. Her teeth were chattering, and the skin of her face felt as if it had been drawn tight, like parchment on a drum.
"Hello? Here, I say, you are cold. I knew you were, what? You hop indoors."
"Yes, but Beaky—" She must stop him going. Detain him somehow, till she could decide what to do.
"Consider it said,"
replied Beaky firmly, and propelled her through the doorway.
"Anyhow, here comes the old bean with the water. I'll be pushing off in a minute. Well, goodbye, and all that sort of rot. I mean, cheerio, what?"
Through the morning room window, a minute later, Lena watched him drive away. The next morning Johnny had a telegram. It came over the telephone, and Lena herself received it. It was from Johnny's brother, Alec, asking Johnny to meet him in London for dinner that evening on urgent business. "Damn," said Johnny. "That's a bit inconvenient. I've been putting off a lot of jobs till Beaky went. Think I ought to go, monkey face?" "Yes," said Lena. "Of course you must. How long will you be away?" "Oh, not more than a couple of nights, if that." "Well, I suppose I'd better pack." Lena was not sorry that Johnny was going away for 2 days. She wanted to be alone. It would help her to get things into their right perspective and rid herself of the lingering shadow of the bogey. She knew now that that moment of absurd panic on the doorstep yesterday morning had been caused by a last flick of the bogey's tail. It had been extremely lucky that Beaky pushed her indoors before she said anything too dreadful. And in any case, Beaky was safe enough in Yorkshire, with Johnny under Alec's eye in London. Not, of course, that there was any question of safety, really. Had not Johnny actually saved his life? Still, Beaky was safe. She went upstairs to see what Johnny was forgetting to pack. Lena forced herself to read the little paragraph again. Paris tragedy. Englishman dead. The Englishman, who was found dead in a house of amusement in Paris, as reported in our later editions yesterday, has now been identified as Mr. Gordon Cochrane Thwaite of Penshayes Court, Yorkshire. Further details are now to hand of the manner in which the tragedy occurred. It appears that Mr. Thwaite visited the resort, which has a questionable reputation, in the company of another Englishman. Both men had evidently been drinking during the evening, and on arrival Mr. Thwaite ordered a bottle of brandy. They then passed into a smaller room, together with 2 young women belonging to the establishment, and all 4 partook of the brandy. According to the statement of one of the girls, the brandy being of a good brand, Mr. Thwaite's companion asked for it to be served in large beakers, and these were provided. In a spirit of bravado, Mr. Thwaite filled one of these to the brim and drank it off. Owing to the fact that neither of the girls understands more than a few words of English, it is not clear how Mr. Thwaite came to perform such a foolhardy action. But their impression is that the men were having a bet on whether Mr. Thwaite would do it or not. Mr. Thwaite's companion was not present when the tragedy happened, having left the house a few moments after the incident of the brandy. The French police have not yet succeeded in establishing his identity. They would be grateful if he would communicate with them, in order that he may confirm the young women's account of what took place. His name would appear to be Allbeam or Holbein. We understand that Penshayes Court is entailed and will pass to a distant cousin of the deceased. Lena was searching feverishly in Johnny's desk in the morning room. Johnny was out. She had not seen him since she had read the paragraph in the newspaper in bed, after her breakfast. How she had managed to get up, dress, talk to the cook, and perform her other routine jobs, just as if this was a morning exactly like any other morning, she hardly knew. She hoped, dully, that the servants had got no inkling of the panic, the horror, and the sick despair through which her mind had had to fight as she talked with them. Now she was free, and, outraging every canon of her upbringing, she was searching Johnny's private papers. She searched, partly in a desperate hope that she might find proof that the man in Paris had not been Johnny, and that it really had been Alec himself and not poor, unsuspecting Beaky who had sent that telegram. Partly in a still more desperate fear that she would find proof of quite another sort. In any case, she must know. She found her proof.